I'm in sunny South Florida, standing in the side yard of my parents' house where I grew up and where I planted a food forest a little over 12 years ago now. Almost 13 years at this point. It's 2023. And right behind me are these beautiful bananas. For those of you that don't think you can grow food in your front yard because it looks ugly, don't think about little raised beds and that sort of thing. Think about fruit trees, particularly if you're in a tropical climate where we have the entire bounty of the tropics at our fingertips. A lot of people will say things like, I want to grow blueberries, I want to grow apples, I want to grow pears like we had up north when they moved to Florida. But Florida, there's maybe 35 or 45 varieties of fruit trees that you know about from up north. You know, all the common stuff. But then you get down here and you can grow all the riches of the tropics. At least a couple thousand fruit varieties. So count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will take you all day long here in South Florida. So this banana right here, I cleaned up all of the dead leaves off the side of it the other day, and it's beautiful. The trunks are gorgeous, and it makes fruit. We actually have a stalk of bananas right now that's ripening up in the garage, and it just sits here right at the corner and looks beautiful. Right here alongside the bananas is a little acerola cherry, also known as Barbados cherry. My dad cut down a big chefalera tree and planted a cherry here some years ago, and that's when I knew he was really serious about the food forest. When he cut down the tree that he had planted, this big ornamental tree, and he said, hey, let's get rid of that thing. It doesn't make any food. We'll put a cherry tree there. That's when I knew I had completely converted him, because he used to just be a landscape guy. And that tree that he planted got blown down in one of the storms. We propped it back up. It lived for about another year and then died of internal damage. And that was very sad because it was a big, beautiful tree. So my family replanted another cherry tree here. So in a few years, maybe it'll get as big as the other one. Let's go along the side here. We've got a little variegated pineapple that's not been planted yet. They make pink pineapples. This came from my friend Eric. And that's a really pretty pineapple. You know, there's another way you could grow food in your yard. Why wouldn't you plant something like that? I mean, if you could plant an ornamental bromeliad, why not plant an edible bromeliad like that? That's gorgeous. This is an ornamental. I don't know that there's anything you can eat on it, but it does have a yam growing on top of it somehow. That's crazy. We've got a little Jamaica cherry tree right here. This tree, I think the birds planted it because I don't remember planting that there, but that's kind of cool. It started to become a self-perpetuating system. Right here, the Malabar chestnut. This is kind of a funny one. I buried some seeds back here some years ago, and we forgot about it, and there was a little hedge in this area, and then I saw this growing out of it, and I thought it was a chefalera tree coming back because they look very similar. I thought, oh, the chefalera must have left a seed, but it looked a little bit different. And then as it grew a little bigger, I said, that's not a chefalera. That's got to be one of those Malabar chestnuts I planted back there. Got seeds from my friend Sarah and planted a seed, and there it goes. I just buried them all over the place. But, you know, we're in the tropics. Things just grow. This banana here, you can see, this is what they look like when they're not cleaned up. It doesn't matter that much to the tree, I don't think. But if you go along with a machete and, you know, clean them all up, they look a lot prettier. So just this one doesn't really matter. I have no idea what variety it is. Might be an ice cream banana. Might not be. I got like 8, 10 different varieties of bananas and just planted them all over. And, you know, just let them go. I don't really care what it is. They make edible fruit. Doesn't matter. Down here we got a little pineapple growing at the base. Anytime my family eats pineapples, they save the tops and you just stick them in wherever you want to and they grow. This is chocolate pudding fruit that I'm standing underneath. So this pineapple is sitting at the base here underneath the beautiful chocolate pudding fruit. Now I tried chocolate pudding fruit some years ago and I thought, that is a fantastic fruit. Diospyros nigra. It's like a black persimmon and it's kind of like eating chocolate pudding. However, this particular tree, even though it looks beautiful, the fruit are really bland on it. I am not impressed with this tree. It's kind of sad because it's really, really beautiful and it's really happy. And it was a sad little tree when I put it in. I got it on sale. It was root bound and yellow. And, well, it's apparently not a good cultivar because it does not taste good, and I thought as it got older it might taste better, but the fruit are only about that big and they just are kind of bland. It's very disappointing, but generally it's a really good tree. As we go back here, we had to make some concessions for grandchildren. There's a swing set, so the swing set stays here. It doesn't make any fruit, but the children enjoy it. Another banana here. About a year ago I went through here and planted banana pups all over. That's when I planted these clumps, maybe a year and a half ago. And this one's actually making a few bananas right now. It's not making very much, just a little bit. You know, one of the problems with growing bananas here, bananas and plantains are one of the best things you can grow in South Florida, but one of the problems with growing them here is that they really like a lot of water and they like some good soil fertility. So you need to be on top of it. You need to be getting them nitrogen and potassium, and they like about twice the rainfall that we get here. Then they produce great, really easy. Just put them at the bottom of your drain spout or run a pipe out of your wall from one of your sinks or your bathtub or something, and don't let code enforcement catch you. And you can grow all the bananas you want. And you know, they just need that constant water and food, and they do better. As you can see, that the soil here, there's not really that much in it. It's not particularly good. It's just this, you know, there's not a lot in it. It's pretty dead. And bananas really like to be fed. We use the banana leaves that I cleaned from up front, put them around here, put them around this little Julie mango, and these couple of banana pups here. The Julie mango is a variety that we really liked when we were in Grenada, and when I found one here, I planted it. It's a very popular variety in the Caribbean. It's a little different than the mangoes you might be used to. It's a little threadier, has a very, very nice flavor to it. My kids like to mash it up inside of the skin because the skin's a little thicker. They would crush it all up around the pit and then rip a hole in the skin and suck all of the pulp out of the inside, which they're not allowed to do when company's over. Katuk growing here. The katuk is actually naturalized. It's dropping seeds all the time, and the seeds have started to plant themselves around. Katuk is a decent edible green. And down here it's really in its element. I've tried to grow it further north. It was never happy. Down here it's like a weed. You just strip the leaves off and throw them in your food. Everything looks a little sad this time of year because we're in the dry season. It's been a little cooler here and stuff isn't quite as happy. If I come back here in June, everything is just solid mass of green. And if you look up here, this is the coconut palm that I planted when I was 15. Most of the coconuts have been harvested off of it, but there's some blooms up there. There'll be some more coconuts coming soon. That was the first edible tree that I ever planted that I remember, and I'm very glad that I did it because over time it has produced a huge amount of coconuts. And before I got down here on this visit, my family and some of the kids, they chopped up coconuts and they ate a bunch of coconut. So that's empty right now. Right here is another tropical almond. It planted itself. It probably shouldn't be here. I planted a little cocoa chocolate tree right here and it died. And this thing planted itself, and my mom said, "Is that a cocoa back there?" And I said, "No, that's tropical almond. It helped itself to the space. If you leave any gaps open, they'll fill themselves." This is an old chaya. We've got a curry leaf tree right here, Morae conigii, and this is like a bay leaf for Indian cooking. And there's some suckers around here. I just gave one of them to Emmanuel from Ultimate Gardening so he could plant it in his own yard. This is the main tree here, and it's about, well, I don't know, it's probably about 20 feet. It's touching the power line, so I should probably prune it back a bit. It's just a really beautiful tree, and we can dig up the suckers and give them away now and again. That's how I actually got this one to begin with. There were some Indians that were friends of a friend, and they had the tree, and I dug up one alongside their sidewalk. They said I could have it, so I planted that in here, and now I've got little ones scattered here and there, and I've been able to give away more. It's very uncommon in the States, unless you know Indians. That's the only way to get it. You have to have Indian friends. Super, super serious. You gotta like be in with the Indians. This is my dwarf mulberry here right now, and it doesn't look really that great. It's, I know it's not the right time of year. I think I need to come in here and I'm gonna come back and pollard this thing again and make it regrow. I think it's kind of getting run over by the mango at this point. It's got a lot of dead stuff on it. Doesn't look particularly happy. It's actually getting to be a pretty old tree at this point. Through here, there's no reason for the Strachina to be here except that it planted itself. There's a lot of various landscape plants that have just grown in here. There's wandering Jew of different types, and there's some ferns, and there's a lot of Tithonia diversifolia, which we planted on purpose. But a lot of these things, like this carrot wood, they planted themselves. And that's just what happens. Florida wants to be a forest. But anything that I don't want in here, I just come through with a machete and I chop it up and feed it to everything else. And you can see that over time, this has made a big difference, right? So here is, I'll see all these are the Tithonias that we've chopped and thrown on the ground year after year after year. Look at underneath. Look at this. Do you see? Look at this. This is mostly insect droppings. This is all feeding the ground. Let's see how deep it goes. Okay, so we've got about 1.5 inches of compost on top of the ground. Now, just for comparison, let's grab some of the sand from outside. It's incredible, isn't it? There's a lot of life in here, and one of the benefits of doing a food forest system like this is it just becomes a self-mulching, self-feeding system over time. You just kind of come through and prune with a machete and clean it up, and whatever lives, lives, and whatever doesn't live wasn't supposed to live. No big deal. More Tithonia along the fence, which we could chop down and feed. Some banana, I don't know what type it is. Again, it's one of those ones I planted. There's already been a banana stalk harvested out of here. This one, not this one, but the one next to it, there's a stump here which was harvested previous. So it's working. They're alive. This is a Suriname cherry, which I started from seed. It makes a tart, sweet fruit. It's very good for you. Suriname cherry used to be used as a hedge plant around South Florida. It's not as popular anymore, but it's very, very beautiful. And there are some improved cultivars that have excellent fruit. I actually have a black one around the corner here that I'm going to be taking and putting in a pot at my place. It's really a plant that likes warm weather, so it's not going to live well where I am. I have to keep it as a potted plant. Through here I stuck in some sweet potatoes a year or more ago, and somewhere there's probably a base that has a bunch of potatoes. I don't even know anymore. Looks like there was potatoes right here. Probably the bugs eat them all, I don't know. I'm not seeing any potatoes. We certainly have a lot of slips we could start new ones with. Sometimes when you leave potatoes in for a really long time, they just kind of stop producing particularly good potatoes, and you gotta take some of the stems and replant them. But at least we have this as a repository of new stems. Any of these could be broken off and planted again as ground cover. And they're kind of fighting with these really pretty purple wandering Jew plants. These are really a pretty tropical, and you'll see these as a potted plant as an ornamental sold up north, but down here they're just a landscape plant. You grow them right outside. I'm standing right now underneath the gigantic mulberry tree. This tree has not been particularly productive down here. It's the 5th Street mulberry from the Edible Plant Project in Gainesville. This was a selection by Craig Hepworth, and it does not like South Florida. It's not that it grows poorly, it actually grows great. It just does not produce fruit very often at all. It's just a handful of mulberries here and there. Whereas the dwarf black mulberry, which is not a particularly good mulberry in general, it's actually terrible. Tastes good, but it's not very productive. That one has produced and produced and produced and produced just these little small fruits, you know. This one makes nice big fruit that are of a higher quality. It just doesn't make them here, so it's kind of funny. It's not as bad as the Grumichama though, which has never made anything for us. This little Grumichama has been here for years, And I joke about it in the Create Your Own Florida Food Forest book, the new edition. You should really read the new edition if you haven't read it yet. Create Your Own Florida Food Forest, where I have all these huge plant profiles. But my plant profile on Gurumichama is mostly just how hilariously bad it's produced for us. This is the black Suriname cherry that I'm going to be bringing with me. I got this from the Broward County Rare Fruit and Vegetable Council, where it was very kindly saved for me from one of their sales, and one of my family members went and picked it up. And as we come around, right behind me, this is another Jamaica cherry, also known as strawberry tree, which also has no fruit on it because there have been a lot of children here. I'm down here for a wedding, and I've got nieces and nephews everywhere. My mom has 28 grandchildren, and they have been enjoying the fruit. So if there was any fruit, it's all gone, which is kind of what you want. Unlike the star fruit tree right here, which has produced so many fruit we haven't been able to eat it all. This star fruit, I put it in the ground. I paid $35 for it originally, over a decade ago. Stuck it in the ground back here. It almost didn't live. It died back. One little branch came out of it, and we put irrigation on it, watered it, took really good care of it for a couple of years, and then it just took off. But the first year was a real stressful, crazy year for it, and it did not do well. And now it's producing and producing and producing and producing and producing. I mean, if you were to try to sell these fruit, I was talking with my sister, and she said it would be about $1 a fruit is what she's seen them sold for. Especially the nicer ones. Some of these are kind of small. Depends on how much rain they're getting, how big the fruit get. She said at $1 a fruit. I was thinking, $1 a fruit? This tree has probably made, $3,500 in fruit. So if you think of your return on investment, it's very, very hard to beat that. Not only that, it's just an incredibly beautiful tree. It's very graceful and feminine. It has this beautiful flow to it with the fruit hanging like Chinese lanterns along the branches. It's one of my very favorite tropical fruit trees. I love how graceful and beautiful it is. There's just something about it. And if you lay underneath one of these trees on a sunny day and watch the light coming through the branches and through the fruit, they light up gold. I just love it. Really cool. Got a couple of moringas in here. Those have done very well. They've been here for a long time. We've cut them back multiple times. They just keep coming back. We get a lot of leaves off them. They actually need to be cut down to like 4 foot tall, and it just hasn't been done. I don't really tend this system anymore, and my mom only does a little bit of work on it. It just produces food and produces food and produces food. As a matter of fact, speaking of producing food, I dug these 2 yams up. Emmanuel was here a couple hours ago, and this is like no work food. These are Dioscorea alata yams, and all I did was stick some bulbils in the ground at some point, and they've grown and died back and regrown and died back and regrown. They always die back once a year. This time of year is when they've died back, and you just have to follow the vines down and find a spot where they're growing and dig them up. That's probably about 3,000 calories. I gave him another one that was about that big, all on the same vine. It just kind of divided up. A couple more bananas here. Another chaya. This is an avocado. I started from a pit. One day it might actually make an avocado. It's 12 years old now. It's bloomed a couple of times, has not made fruit. It may not have a pollinator. We've got a little Monstera deliciosa down at the bottom. Split leaf philodendron is another name for that. Here we've got orchids just hanging out of the tree. You can't do that up north. We just plant orchids on the trees because they're beautiful, and they're kind of hanging here and there, and sometimes you see them when they bloom and you forget there was an orchid there until you see the blooms just living in the canopy. It's warm enough to do that. And then I guess the star of the whole food forest is this mango tree, which I have cut the center out of. I cut it very severely to keep it out of the power lines and let it branch sideways a little bit. You can keep a mango whatever size you want. So when I planted my little Julie mango behind me, I'm not that worried. I'm not going to let it get this big. This one got this big when I was not tending it, and it's not too big. it's really been controlled. We were able to do some remedial pruning on it, but it would be nicer if it was a little bit smaller. But it produces a lot of mangoes. Not in season right now, but a literal ton of mangoes have come off of this tree so far. And it's not hard to set up something like this. All we did was go out and buy some fruit trees. We raided the neighbor's yard waste bins. You know, there's rolling bins here. We just rolled them down here. We dumped them onto the ground all around the trees that we had planted and just let that stuff rot down. And then as we had other plants, we stuck them in. We had a lot of plants in here that died. We had other things that planted themselves. And the ones that have been here that were supposed to be here, they just kept growing. Some of them from seeds, some of them from cuttings, and some of them were grafted trees that we purchased at nurseries. And if I was actively managing this system, we could get tons more food. But even without active management, with just having this little backyard space that's watered by the rain and occasionally trimmed back and macheted down to open up light, it still produces a lot of food, and it's really simple. Plus, this is way more beautiful than just looking at a privacy fence back here. When you look out of my parents' house, you see this wall of green, and there's always butterflies through here and birds through here, and then the blooms of the orchids. And my little cousins love to come back here and play and pick all the fruit. So it's a nice place to play as well as being a beautiful backdrop. If you want to learn more about the food forest systems and particularly how to build them in Florida, check out the new edition of Create Your Own Florida Food Forest. That is the second edition, which is massively illustrated and expanded. It's huge. It's got a bunch of plant profiles in it. It's got 200 illustrations. Over 50 different artists contributed to it. And it's based on the research we did with this system and then my much more heavily managed system up in North Florida and some other systems that we worked on in the state, plus some of the research we did down in the tropics with different species and the experiences of different gardeners that had been sent in to me and different people I'd interviewed. So it's your overall resource for starting a Florida food forest. If you've moved to Florida and you want to know how to garden, Florida wants to be a forest, and you can produce so much food here. It's absolutely ridiculous. But don't pay attention to what's going on up north and how people grow up north. This is different. Think an edible tropical forest. It's like a rainforest system in your backyard, kind of kept to a smaller controllable scale. And the food production of the tropics is incredible. And we're close enough to the tropics here that you can make food year-round with very little work once you know what to grow. Thanks for joining me. Catch you all next time. And until then, may your thumbs always be green.